Yosuga Sora, otherwise known as In Solitude, Where We Are Least Alone, is an anime that released on the October of 2010, and is an anime very much comparable to Kiss X's and Oremo in the sense that it has to do with, well, don't cancel me for this, alright guys. Yeah, it has to do with incest.
Oh my god!
Alright, but before you click off this video, I'm not about to justify or advocate the Alabama activities that happened in Yosuga Sora, but instead take an objective look to why it is commonly misunderstood and consequently misjudged by many. So, grab a seat and curb your immediate urge to jump to conclusions like, oh my god, this is incest, this is the worst anime ever, why would anyone ever watch this? And, well yeah, let's begin. First, let's take a look at the name, Yosuga Sora. While officially translated in English as In Solitude, Where We Are Least Alone, it is better thought of as a smart Japanese play on words, as the two words Yosuga and Sora can carry various meanings. While Yosuga can carry the meaning of a relative, or someone or something to depend on, Sora can refer to the main character's little sister, Sora Kasugano, or Sora as in the Japanese word for sky. You can get a bunch of iterations of the title, as you can get Yosuga Sora, which can mean Sora who I depend on or I need, or Sora who I am related to, Sora the blood sibling, a sky of relationships, a sky of family ties, and etc. And while all of these titles can have drastically different meanings, within the context of the show, I believe it works extremely well, and we can think of it as a poetic design choice. Taking a quick look at the synopsis of the series, it mainly revolves around the Kasugano siblings, Kasugano Haruka and Kasugano Sora. But mainly Haruka, or Haru-chan in the series, is the main character throughout the entirety of the show. At the very beginning, these two are orphaned due to both their parents perishing in an accident, forcing them to move to their old home located in Okukozome, a rural quaint town of their childhood. Now, throughout the 12 episodes that is Yosuga Sora, we get to experience and explore into the characters of the town and how they interact, form relationships with the two siblings. From this point onwards, there are heavy spoilers and to some extent even beyond the anime and delving a little bit into the visual novel, so if you have not watched Yosuga Sora, I'd highly advise you to watch it first and return after you have completed it. As Yosuga Sora is based off a visual novel of the same name, the anime also adopts the storytelling format of a typical visual novel, starting with a main branch that goes down different routes to explore different events and endings. There are a total of 4 routes in this anime, 5 actually if you include the Nogisaka Motoka maid route in the special section at the end of every episode. To give a brief overview of each route, in this exact order we have Migiwa Kazuya route, or as I like to refer to as the violin girl route, and yes, I know it's technically a viola, but you nerds get my point. This route mainly has Haruka spend more time with Kazuha, and ultimately unveil the fact that Amatsume Akira, the town shrine maiden and common classmate of theirs, is her sister, but not really actually, but we'll touch on that later. This of course comes with some family complications, mostly between Kazuha and her father, but the ending is rather happy I'd say, with Haruka putting in effort in encouraging Kazuha to resolve things of the past with her father, and the route ends with both of them, well, absolutely smashing the... Yeah, this is gonna be a common ender for all the routes, so get used to it. Coming up next, we have the Amatsume Akira route, aka the Shrine Maiden route, which in my eyes is actually an extension to the Kazuha route, as everything that happened in Kazuha's storyline actually retains itself here. But what happens is that it adds new elements to the storyline, such as the dynamic of Amatsume Akira actually not being related by blood at all to the Migiwa household, and it turns out that the reason that they are sisters is due to a hospital mix-up of babies and different mothers. And it basically uncovers more about Kazuha's mother, which we never got to hear from in the previous route. Of course, our main character Haru resolves this through DNA testing, and of course, more banging. God, it'll be a miracle if this video gets monetized somehow. Alright, I'm gonna be real with you guys for a second. The first time I saw this character, Yorihime Nao, God, I absolutely hated how this character looks. She's got I don't know how to explain it, a very hateable face. I'm pretty sure some of you guys might agree with me in the comments. But yeah, she's the character of the Nao route, or otherwise I like to call it the childhood friend route. So when watching this arc, I noticed in many discussion and review forums that there are a significant amount of people who absolutely despise the existence of Nao. But on the other hand, some people actually really like this character. and defend why she isn't a very hateable character. And I think that both sides have justifiable reasoning, and I can't really say which opinion is correct or valid. But personally, at the very beginning, I can see why people dislike now. It's hard to objectively put my finger on it, but character design has a very relatable. I mean, let's. Her character design is just very hateable. The haircut, the glasses, the overall mannerisms make her a hateable character by default. And to add on to that, the history of now basically forcing herself on Haruka as kids only just adds to this accessible easiness to hate now. I mean, like, what were they, 6 years old? Come on, if that isn't messed up, I don't know what is. But yeah, throughout this route, we get to see now genuinely regret her past actions and actually tries to at first distance herself from the Kasugano siblings to not mess things up even further. But with further interactions with Haruka, she even goes as far as to try to fix her wrongs and properly acknowledge both the siblings, especially Sora's feelings towards her and Haruka, and actually tries to get Sora to approve of them being together. And I think this is actually what redeems the character in the end. But, we'll discuss on that later. The final route, which is what made Yosuga Sora so famous, or I should really say infamous, is the Sora route. Now, despite this being the final storyline in the series, I find it the least enjoyable compared to the others, but it is undeniably the most fleshed out and developed route, as I feel like so far the routes in order get a lot of background and context in increasing order as we watch them, with the previous Now route bringing a lot of the Kasugano siblings' past into the storyline, and this info lends itself well into the Sora route. In this storyline, instead of spending more time with his friends and the other characters, Haruka decides to spend more time with Sora at home, which in my eyes actually is a respectable choice as an older brother, as I am one myself, and you really got to hand it to Haruka, as at times Sora can be annoying and actually straight up selfish, which I find it extremely relatable actually, as it is semi-realistic. Real life Onisans, you know what I'm talking about. But anyways, through spending more time with each other, Haruka supports Sora a lot at home as she is still recovering from her injury, I assume, because she is shown in the show to be very weak. As basically he's the MVP of the house, he does the dinner and tends to Sora's requests and all that stuff. Until one day he realizes that he catches Sora doing some self-care, which is normal, until he realizes that he is the self-care material, which devastates him, rightfully so. And I really like how they handled this scene and this route in particular. The entire time you feel an unset tension between the Kasugano siblings and the uneasiness that is present in nearly every scene. It's extremely underrated how the producers were able to create such an atmosphere, and unfortunately it goes under the radar thanks to how uncomfortable and unsettling it is to the audiences. For me though, and I hope some of you, just because a scene or show was not enjoyable doesn't mean it's bad. In fact, the whole vibe of the show, the uneasiness, the grey morality, is what the producers wanted to convey, and I think they did a great job, as all the elements from visual design to the soundtrack succeeded in creating the vibe that they aimed for. And that brings us back to the story where Sora can no longer hide her feelings for Haruka and comes clean about how she feels about him. But what I find interesting is that unlike all the other so-called incest anime out there like Kiss Exes and Oremo, the MC in this case, Haruka, actually doesn't just straight go Alabama. He actually has a semi-realistic reaction to it and actually tries to deny her advances in the first place because I guess, yeah, it's the right thing to do. He wants to be a good older brother and not smash his sister. But what I also find very interesting is that he inevitably gives into it in the end, although with much regret. And this creates a very big conflict that leads to, in the end, Sora trying to end her own life by going basically to drown herself into the town river. Or no, it's not a river, it's a lake. And I think it's a good time to move into the ending of the anime and like how I interpret it. Coming close to the end, the Kasugano siblings have a massive argument thanks to their differences, with Sora wanting to be with Haruka, but he doesn't want any of that. And that eventually leads to Sora running away from home. But before she does that, she actually tears apart her stuffed rabbit that she has the entirety of the show, which is pretty alarming when Haruka finds it because it's a memento of her late mother. So you can only imagine how she's feeling when she decides to rip that rabbit apart. And so, obviously, Haruka, being the concerned brother he is, gathers his friends. Actually, no, I believe it's just now. Yeah, the two of them search frantically for Sora around the town, with Haruka even tripping a few times on his bike. But he eventually remembers that earlier Akira was telling everyone about how you go to the town lake to be sort of reborn. But in this case, he finds Sora there about to end her own life as she tries to walk off into the lake, supposedly trying to suicide. However, Haruka tries to stop her, but in an unfortunate turn of events, they both slip and go off the deep end. And they struggle a bit, but it's very evident that these two characters throughout the show are unable to swim and they hit the bottom of the lake. But in the next scene, we see that they actually are on the surface by the lake, with Sora seemingly having saved both of them, and they basically embrace until sunrise. And then we skip forward a bit into we time skip forward, and we see the rest of the cast, all the other characters other than the siblings, basically walking down the street, reminiscing about their old days and talking about how the siblings have moved on. They supposedly started life in another country, and it also shows Kazuha. Yeah, Kazuha, not Kazuha. God dang, I keep saying Kazuya. I play too much Mishimas in Tekken. But anyways, yeah, it shows Kazuha reading an email supposedly coming from the siblings about how they are trying to be happy and trying to make do with what they have, living with an artisan in another country. And finally, it pans to what seems to be a loop to the beginning of the anime, with both the Kasugano siblings, Haruka and Sora, in a train as they are riding to an unknown location. The whole sequence feels very dreamlike, as there's no one else on the train, and yeah, they basically that's how the show ends. And you could kind of interpret it as a good ending. It doesn't really end happy, but it doesn't really end like ultimately sad. But here's my interpretation of it. First thing that doesn't make sense is that how in the world are these siblings alive after they seemingly drown? Well, my theory is that they actually died. My theory is that they died, and the evidence behind this is, well, the two of the siblings really can't swim. We saw them hit the bottom of the lake. And in the next sequence, the very ending sequence, we see that Sora actually retains her stuffed rabbit, which was clearly torn up in the previous scene. So, yeah, they died. And to explain how Kazuha gets the email, she was actually in possession of Haruka's cell phone before the events happened, so I believe she forged it to, I guess, make the impact of their death less on their friends, as evidently when they pass by the Kasugano's house, Kazuha is the only one that bows in a way you would pay respect to the dead in Japanese culture. And yeah, that is I believe the true ending, and it is actually what happens. I'd say it's a very fitting ending for this kind of show. Unlike, once again, the other competitors in the incest anime category, such as Kisses or Remo, and to some extent even Amagami SS. But yeah, the harsh reality really hits. In my opinion, there should be no way these characters are allowed to have a happy ending, because they simply have sinned too much, and the end was inevitable for them. And I really like the move by Kazuha by trying to minimize the damage to their friend group, as it was already very strained to begin with, but she just did some more damage control. But that's the ending, and we'll move on to an actual review. Overall, when I look at Yosuga Sora as a whole, I really hate to see that the people who watch it are one, incest enthusiasts, or the other half seem to be blinded by the fact that it has incest in the show, and that kind of takes away the other elements. Like, come on. Like, we have a total of 4 routes or 4 arcs in this story, and only the last 3 episodes really are about incest. But the other 3 previous routes are so packed with character development, intricate stories that are put together. There are little to no plot holes. In fact, I don't believe I have caught any plot holes so far, because at the end of the day, you have to really remember that this is an anime based off a visual novel. But despite having multiple routes, I find that it somehow retains a great amount of continuity between the routes, as many of the happenings and events in previous routes actually, a lot of them carry forward. And a great example of this is throughout the entire series, I've always realized that Haruka sort of he kind of has no chill, you know. Like normally he is generally a nice guy, but during like the very sussy scenes, he all of a sudden some switch flips in him and like he goes like ham mode, and I really wondered why. But when you look at it from a psychological aspect, you can actually boil it down to that time where now Yorihime actually assaulted him when they were like 6 years old. And it's very evident that this event happens in every single route. And I find it to be a very sound explanation to why he is the way he is. And there are many more examples within the show with all these characters. And all these characters themselves, despite being side characters, they each feel so fleshed out. They each have their own very real problems, and they have very much real situations to deal with. And I find it that actually, instead of branding Yosugano Sora as an anime about incest, this might be a far stretch to say, but I think it's an anime about mental health, as you can actually break down each of the characters' events to they all have traumatic life events, and they each carry very different elements. But if I were to if I were to rate the anime as a whole, officially on my anime list, it's rated as 6.08 if I'm not mistaken. And personally, I feel like that's a little bit too low. Not to say the show is without flaws though. One of the biggest qualms I have about it is the sort of sussy scenes. Yeah, some of them really feel they're meant to feel uneasy. They're meant to feel morally gray, but some of them just seem a little bit too spicy for my liking, and that kind of ruins a bit of the atmosphere and kind of gives the wrong message sometimes. So I think that's one of their flaws. But total, I would rate it 6.9. Ironically enough, it's in that very unique zone where I can't give it a 7, but I would give it the very highest of the 6, so 6.9. In terms of story, it's not the most original story ever, but I do like how they want to take a realism aspect to it. So for story, I'd actually give them a solid 7. In terms of soundtrack, the opening and endings are really nice. They have a very 2010s vibe to it, and as a kid, I watched a lot of my anime during this time, so I think there's a nostalgic aspect for me. I'm going to give the soundtrack actually a solid 8, thanks to the main theme, the main soundtrack, Toi Sorae. Yeah, you guys, it's the theme that plays throughout the anime. You guys probably know it. And in terms of character design, I give them a solid 9 actually. I find the characters very interesting, not just visually, but also in terms of their development, their personalities, they're very distinct from one another. I find that they do a very good job. But to sum it all up, Yosuga Sora, I would say, is a hidden masterpiece actually. It is definitely not an enjoyable watch. It is not a Netflix and chill anime. Would I watch it again? No. But do I regret watching it? Simultaneously, the answer to that is no as well. I definitely don't regret watching Yosuga Sora. It has definitely showed me something new. It does something that other anime, I don't think they even dare to attempt. And I think it should be applauded for that. Who would I recommend to watch this show? I definitely recommend a more mature audience. You shouldn't. This is not a kids show. Anime is not all anime are for kids. And definitely someone who is able to comprehend and try to analyze these things to fully appreciate what Yosuga Sora is. And yeah, that is my conclusive breakdown of Yosuga Sora. Let me know if you guys enjoy these kind of content that I don't really do on my channel, but I do watch a lot of anime, so if you guys want to see more breakdowns of other anime, leave it down in the comments. If you want to see me do a detailed breakdown of all the separate routes in Yosuga Sora, or perhaps even other aspects, also leave it down in the comment. Leave a like if you enjoyed and subscribe. It really takes a substantial amount of effort for me to do this, and I'd really appreciate it if you guys could. And I'll see you guys in the next video.